What did we read about yesterday here? Um, we would have started reading the section on improving complex mastery for medical students, I believe, which means we've likely finished developing discrimination skills. Developing discrimination skills. What we have wrapped up on there? I know we would have been reading this the day before as well. We would have been talking about things like interleaved and varied practice, increasing the nuance of the contextual understanding of skills and knowledge. We would have talked about the. Okay. Yeah. I think we would have studied the birds yesterday and the paintings, right? Varied, varied. No. We're talking about interleaved practice. Okay. Yes. No. Yes. No. What would that? Yes. Yes. Okay. Things are coming back to me now. So we would have looked at two different, um, maybe landmark studies or classic studies, showcasing that this discrimination ability and how it's developed, and why it's important, and kind of illustrating how it's done, and whether mass practice or interleaved and varied practice, which one is more important for learning different things. So we start out with the painters and their paintings. So the goal is to have these students learn whose paintings are whose. Really, you look at a painting and you're like, that's a Picasso, that's a Monet, that's a Basquiat, whoever it might be. And so, the first group, they get taught all of one painter's paintings before learning the next set of all another painter's paintings, and then all the next. And this is what we consider mass practice. And the other group, however, got one painting from one painter, then got a different painting from a different painter, and a different painting from a different painter, and every painting was new, and not every painting was new, but it was all mixed up. It wasn't like ordered like one painter, then the next painter, then the next painter, until you've finished them all. It's like one painter's paint one painting, and then another painter's painting, and then another, and then it's all jumbled up one at a time, versus like painter by painter. It goes just painting by painting. Hopefully that's clear enough. The hypothesis at the beginning, or common intuition, is that the mass practice, learning all of one painter's first, and then the next, is going to keep it understandable, whereas the interleave practice is going to be too complex, too much information. It's going to be too difficult to learn. What are the results? Well, the group that interleaved the paintings performed much better than the mass practice group, and they performed much better at recognizing paintings that they had not even studied, and being able to distinguish who the painter was from paintings had not even studied. So that was a painter and paintings test, or study. And authors kind of noted this side note that it's like the commonalities that were learned from mass practice were less important than the differences that were learned from interleaved practice. Okay, then we get into birds. So this was a study about the goal being to teach people to be able to distinguish birds, different species, different families. And this is very complex because within a family of birds, there's no defining features. There's characteristic features. That is, there's no one feature that makes this family this family. It's that a lot of them have this feature, but not all of them. So they have characteristic features rather than defining features. Again, mass practice, one species, one family, then a new species, new family, versus just mixing them all up. Who did better? Mixing them all up again, interleaved. All right. Cool. And this discerning ability, this discrimination ability, these are what makes knowledge actually valuable. It makes knowledge actually applicable when you actually need it in the real world. When it's super masked and you only know how to use this procedure or knowledge or skill or whatever when giving this scenario that's very predictable in school or whatever it may be, and then you actually see that different scenario in the real world that's mixed up but requires the same skill or knowledge, you may not be able to actually pull it out. So is that knowledge actually valuable? Not really. So mixing and interleaving practice makes knowledge actually applicable, actually valuable by studying different contexts, different variations, so that you can apply it creatively when the time comes. Okay? And then we started the studying advanced, we started reading Improving Complex Mastery for Medical Students. Basically, every patient that you diagnose, or doctor diagnoses, is kind of like a new retrieval practice that's varied and interleaved. It's all new symptoms, new, person, new time of day, new date, all this variation. So it's kind of like a test. I noted that, all right, but the feedback isn't great. You don't know if you got it right or wrong necessarily right away. Maybe you do learn later on, maybe you made mistakes or you got it right. Then you get that delayed feedback, which we've learned is important and more valuable anyway than immediate feedback. But let's see what we forgot, if anything. Right, so one thing I forgot, implicit and explicit knowledge, or memory. So explicit memory when you're in that doctor scenario, or just in general, explicit memory is like when you're thinking through things consciously. Implicit memory is not conscious, it's subconscious. It's more like intuition or instincts around something that you've studied. But you can't really consciously recall the memory, but you have an intuition of what you should do or what the answer is. Cool. Okay, we got all the Improving Complex Mastery for Medical Students stuff then. Here we go. Bird identification. Cool. Okay, so at the end of this discrimination section, we also read about people being, again, like, well, is retrieval practice even important for conceptual understanding? Because there is a difference between conceptual understanding and factual understanding, right? Being able to recognize and recall facts, or actually being able to understand the underlying principles and the nuances of something. There's a difference, right? So would retrieval practice basically just be practicing factual retrieval and memorization, not really that important? Nope. Just like how you need to have raw facts and raw knowledge in order to apply them, right? You need knowledge to use knowledge creatively, so you can't have creativity without previous knowledge. Just like this, in a similar way, you cannot have conceptual understanding without raw base ingredients, some facts, some examples. This stuff helps to fuel conceptual understanding. So yes, retrieval practice, varied interleaved retrieval practice, spaced repetitions, they do improve conceptual understanding. More data, more facts, more examples leads to quicker, better, deeper conceptual understanding. All right. One more thing, I didn't even see this one, but I forgot this. So for that painting study, and probably the bird study as well, even the students, after seeing results that the interleaving practice was better than and led to better results than the mass practice, they still felt intuitively like mass practice was better and more productive. So huge note that even when you see the results, you're still going to want to think that mass practice is more effective when in reality it's not. Okay. Okay. All right. I think that's everything. All right, so we'll continue reading, and then I'll be back for a recall in a second. So talk to you in a sec. All right, so I just read about 2 pages from Improving Complex Mastery for Medical Students. Right, so there's this guy named Larson. He's like a doctor, a teacher, a researcher on improving medical training and learning. And so in his research, he's found in the medical training and learning, medical schools, a few important, or a few findings. And I just basically read about the first one. So the first finding that's important is that students who actually practice a skill, such as actually see patients in a clinic during their training, will be better at seeing patients in the clinic or the actual skill than people compared to people who have just read about the skill itself or performing or the theory, right? So kind of obvious, but you don't necessarily think about that. So like if you have an actual skill to perform, performing the actual skill is going to lead to greater learning and performance of that skill than reading about the theory of the skill or reading about someone performing the skill or how to perform the skill. However, on a written exam, people that just read about it and people that actually performed it will do basically equally well. So, and this is why, we're seeing more and more simulators for complex skill training, because the simulation of the actual thing leads to greater learning than reading about it or being taught about it or lecturing about it or hearing about it, etc. All right, so that's the first finding. We're about to read the second finding now, and I'll recall it when I do. Talk to you in a sec. All right, so I just read the second finding of this Larson and the medical research on medical education. The second finding is kind of a little abstract for me and a little, I don't know, not necessarily what I fully believe, but maybe it's correct. Maybe I just have a incorrect. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense logically. Anyway, here's what it was basically. Overemphasis on variation can distract from the basics or the fundamentals. So if we have a patient that has, some disease, there's a lot of ways this disease can manifest, but we don't want to overemphasize all the different variations when there's like one way that is there like 90% of the time. 90% of the time this symptom is what manifests from this illness or disease, but there's 100 different variations. So instead of equally, practicing all the 100 variations, you gotta I think the point is to, focus 90% of your effort or a big chunk of the effort on the symptom that's there 90% of the time. So I think that's the point. Again, factual understanding versus conceptual understanding. I think if you got a big, broad understanding or knowledge of all the different symptoms, it may help you understand what's actually going on with the underlying disease, what's causing it, from a systematic perspective, holistic perspective. But besides the point, let's continue. Got 3 more minutes, so let's try to get through another paragraph or so. It's maybe 2 paragraphs. All right, be back in a sec. All right, wrapping up for today. This last point or finding from Larson kind of findings are the importance of learning from experience. So, in medical school, you only spend 2 years in the actual classroom, and then you're out on, learning in the job in the clinical settings. Then you go through residency. So much of medicine and being a doctor is learning from experience. And then that poses the question, well, what differentiates experience we learn from and experience that we don't learn from? Because there's plenty of experience we have that we don't learn from. So what is the underlying difference in the experience that we learn from and the experience that we don't learn from? So, all right, that was a couple of pages from Improving Complex Mastery for Medical Students. We're now into page 59. My back is peeling from a sunburn. But yeah, page 59. We've come a long way. We've got a long way to go. This leaves us, there's 253 pages in the book total, so we'll keep moving. The ups and downs, we'll keep riding the roller coaster through it all. So, all right, talk to you guys later. See ya.